For that, I explained to right away, this is the reason why we are not going to talk in detail about scissor bites, because the main problems that we have in scissor bites are either locally or over one side of the jaw, and then can be treated equivalent to what we do with a crossbite. So once we understand the concept of treating a crossbite, we will be able to correct the scissor bite as well. So we are not really going to talk about much about this one. So we have the crossbite, which is about 95% of the transverse problems. The transverse problem of a crossbite can be unilateral or bilateral. And unilateral. Just remember, when we're talking about a crossbite, we are talking about a transverse problem. So we are not talking about an anterior crossbite, a class 3. This is something that belongs to the ABCD system. This is not part of the transverse problem. Transverse problem means actually a lateral crossbite, which could be bilateral or unilateral. And when we look at this, we again have a distribution of about 80% of unilateral versus round about 20% of bilateral crossbites that we have to look at. And we will look into it a little bit more in detail in a minute. So there's some of you coming in with more than one device. So let's see what you're doing with this. So 80%, 20%. When we look at the crossbite again, and we talk quickly about functional problems which may be caused by transverse problem. Then we have a clear and significant problem with unilateral crossbites, which produce a significant or more or less significant asymmetry, which can lead, depending on when it exists, very early or later, before growth, after growth, and so on, it can lead to significant problems in the function of the jaw joints and even asymmetric development of the condyles. So this is always something which is important actually to look at and to treat. No matter what crossbite we have, we will also have to look at something else. I just go over to this side. And that's either if it's a skeletal or a dentoalveolar problem. We looked at this already when we were talking about Wilson and Waller ridge and Wilson curve, when we are looking at our model analysis. So this is something you should already know, ideally, how to distinguish between a primarily skeletal problem or a primarily dentoalveolar problem. Just to give you a super quick reminder, I'm not going into detail this time to look at this. First of all, when we have inwards angulated molars, so we look at the maxilla from the front, for example, we see they are leaning inwards, and we have a mandible like this. We would have what we can see here, obviously a bilateral crossbite on both sides. But as we have the chance to upright the molars quite significantly here, purely dentally, we will have a primarily dental problem here. And you can see the deep Wilson curve here. Something else we can look at the same time is, I do it differently on both sides so we can talk about both scenarios in a minute. Where we look at the alveolar bone and the maxillary versus the mandibular bone, we can see here's the Waller ridge, here's the Waller ridge, we can see the maxilla is much wider than the mandible. This is fine. So again, this is a sign that there's not a skeletal problem in the transverse. If it is the other way around, like here, As we can see on that side, for example, that's just a schematic drawing. That's not a real scenario, but it's showing what we're going to talk about. So if the mandible is wider than the maxilla, we have a Wahler discrepancy. Remember, Wahler, William Andrews, Larry Andrews. That's a Wahler discrepancy we need to look at. Then we have a clear skeletal problem. And we have here the Wilson curve. Is the Wilson curve deep? That's fine. If we have already the situation that the teeth are already like this, they are already tipped to the max buccally, and we still have a crossbite, then we have a problem. That's a reverse Wilson curve. Then we can't do any more dental-alveolar correction of the problem. Then again, it means no matter where exactly our Wahler is, we will have to expand skeletally. So, but this is just a previous summary of what we need to look at in terms of diagnosis. We see this already when we do our model analysis or looking at our patients or intraoral photos, our scans and so on. And we can decide already, is the problem skeletal or dental-alveolar? Now we actually come to the actual things that we can do. And this is the toolbox, transverse. And as you know already from the ABCD system and from the 5 ways to gain space and so on, we start with the earliest type of treatment and with the least invasive treatment. And we go step by step forward, later treatment, more complex treatment, more invasive treatment. And we sum up everything that we can do and that we need to do. And first of all, what we can do is that when we have a crossbite, when we just have baby teeth, there are usually 2 problems. Number 1 is the following, that we have a baby molar and one is in the crossbite, for example, the other one is fine, and we have a shift to the side. This is very easy to be treated with option number 1, first of all, and we are talking about not yet the mixed dentition, we are talking about the baby teeth only. Then we can start with a bite block on the molars. And what we're going to do here is we will have 3 types of bite blocks actually. One bite block will be simple plain, one will be with impressions. I show you in a minute what I mean by that. And one is an inclined plane. So what we can do here is, let's look at it again. We have here a molar, we have here another molar, that one's in crossbite, that one's in crossbite too, and we're talking about baby teeth first of all. So what we want to make sure is that there's no functional shift to the side which will induce asymmetric growth of the condyles and the whole face. So the only thing what we want to do in a moment is just bringing the jaw backwards into a functional occlusion, into the centric position of the condyles so the face can actually grow normally. We are not talking about expansion or anything else right now. We are just talking correcting the centric position of the condyles first of all. So what we do here is that we can place bite blocks. I'll just show you. We can do, first of all, maybe a plain bite block. Now, the lower jaw isn't forced anymore to the side in terms of a forced shift due to the occlusal shape of the molars. The patient now can re-establish normal muscular function. and shift back in the middle, allowing normal growth. Obviously, we still have a deficiency in the upper and the lower in terms of width, but this is not the problem in the first step. This will be later on. We will look at it, of course, but first of all, we just want to make sure that the centric position is okay. So sometimes it's really enough to have plain bite blocks on the molars and the patient, the little boy or little girl, just moves back into the central position. Sometimes this is not enough. Sometimes we need to add some extra impressions in the bite block to have some guidance. So it's not plain anymore. We have an occlusal relief basically actually here, which will be like a helper for the patient to find the correct position to do some training. So instead of just sliding towards the middle automatically, the patient needs actively to find the position. And so we have a proper, nice guidance and helper. And once the patient finds the middle, the patient can train that, train the muscle function, and stay in this position. Sometimes we have the situation that this is not enough, that the patient just is not finding the right way to move over. Then we can go simply for an incline plane as well and do the bite block like this. To help the lower jaw shifting over toward the central position. And sometimes we can even start with this, shift it over. Once the patient finds the position, we can move to the next step, go for bite blocks with impression to make sure it stays stable in that position. So that's the easiest part. The next part can be also done when we have the problem with the molars, or we have the problem, which is quite frequent as well, in the mixed dentition or baby teeth dentition, that we have the canines being the main factor why we have the crossbite, like that. And the next invasive step will be that we just trim the teeth down a little bit. So we use our burr here and flatten the cusps a little bit, and we are allowing then some shift over to that side. That's super simple with the molars, super quick and easy, but quite frequently we need to do the same thing with the canine. Overlap of the canines is quite significant, so we just can't do the same as we did here, just like cutting them down the full way, because then maybe even the pulp will be opened up and we have a problem with this tooth. The easiest way actually is to do it like this, cut it down here, here and here. So we have only a little bit of reduction, which allows at the same time, due to the diagonal trimming, that we can have a nice shift over to that side as well. And of course, we can combine both of these versions as well. So next one is trimming baby canine. Or the baby molar. Sometimes when we do that, there's a little bit of guiding missing. And what can we do, obviously, for that? Same thing again as above. We can add plus number 1. That means we have maybe a really significant overlap, so we need to have some extra vertical space. We can cut them down, the canines, and add some bite blocks on the molars, for example, plain bite blocks. Or we can trim the molars down and the canines. So we have flat surfaces, but still the patient is not really finding the correct position. Then we can add additionally impressions in the correct position, or even an inclined plane to activate that shift to the centric position. So that's number 2, very simple. Number 3, now we're starting with dentoalveolar treatment and first measures and how to correct it actively. The next step will be an expansion plate. A removable appliance, upper removable appliance with expansion screw to widen the maxilla. How does it look usually, this type of appliance? Very simple, like always. We have an acrylic base, we have an Adams clasp, and now depending on if it's just baby teeth or if we are in a mixed dentition, if it's just baby teeth, then we just have the labial bone. If we have 2 premolars already here, we may have another triangular clasp as well. And we have the expansion screw here. But this is not all, because again, and this one will follow through the whole process, sometimes we have the following problem. We have the molar here, as we just seen before. And then we start expanding the upper, which is fine and easy. But the trouble what we have sometimes is that we have such a really interlocking occlusion on that unhealthy crossbite side here, that the upper molar is pushing the lower forward as well. Even though we don't want any movement in that area, it can happen due to the stable, not wanted crossbite occlusion here. So what do we need to do? We have to stop that immediately, and easily we can do that by adding some bite blocks here. So we create some vertical space, so we have upper expansion, and at the same time the lower jaw, the mandible, can slide back, shift back into the middle. How does it look on a brace like that? You have extended acrylic here with bite blocks over here. Some use soft acrylic, some use really the normal one like the bases. I personally use the hard one like the bases. It's very simple, and you can have it flattened out, or you can do the same thing as before again. You could use impressions, which doesn't make sense to use impressions on both sides, but if we want to keep this side here as it is, so it could make sense to use some bite blocks with impressions here on that side, while we have the flat one on the other side. So we can even combine that. And obviously we could use, when we have really significant shift, we could use like, same again as before, an inclined plane as well, to shift actively the mandible over to that side, while at the same time we are expanding here, making the maxilla wider. Now, when we do that in baby teeth or in a mixed dentition, is only dentoalveolar movement happening? No, not really. When you remember growth and development, you know that the maximum growth of the maxilla will be in the age of 8 to 10, which is pretty much in that area when we have all these early crossbites, mixed dentition and baby dentition. So we will have quite frequently some kind of skeletal expansion at the same time, even though this appliance is actually designed only for dentoalveolar correction. But we just do it at the same time, if we want to or not, because that's normal growth, what's happening during that time. With this appliance, obviously we can force the growth even more, but back to that a bit later. So this is the easiest way to use a removable appliance for that. So again, expansion plate URA plus 1. So again, as I said, we can use bite blocks. Not necessarily this time when we use here bite blocks, we're doing like glass ionomer cement, for example. We don't do glass ionomer cement on the removable. We could do additionally if you want to, but doesn't make much sense. We can build it in the expansion plate and use normal acrylic like we do for the base as well. So next step. Then we have patients, they don't wear the expansion plate, the URA, so we need something fixed. And the first and easiest way to use something fixed will be either the quad helix or the transpalatal arch, the TPA. So the quad helix will be mainly when we have a group problem, the TPA when it's a localized problem. And we don't go too much into biomechanics right now, but this obviously is something I'm always asked. How can we make sure that we have only one side expansion and the other no expansion? First of all, it's always difficult when we just have a tooth-borne appliance. But on the other hand, it is definitely possible just by adjusting the torque and the tip of the teeth. So when we have some torque here and then a normal expansion on that side, the torque here will lead to more expansion on that side. This applies as well for the TPA as well for the quad helix. So that's option number 1 that we have. Option number 2 that we have with the quad helix especially is when there's just one molar, let's say the 6 is in crossbite, nothing else, just the 6 on one side unilateral crossbite. This is extremely simple to solve with the quad helix, and you do it like this. We have the 6, we have the 5, 4, baby 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, baby 3, baby 4, baby 5, and the 6. Then we have the quad helix here, looking somehow like this. Attachment here on the molar band, and then we have this long arm here on that side, and we cut the long arm of the quad helix off on that side. So that means we have immediately a big unit of teeth here working against just one tooth on that side. So we created a nice biomechanical system that helps moving that one over to that side a lot, while this is moving still, but only a little. Additionally, we have obviously a healthy side here. We can add bite blocks as well, again, to support this as well. So what we can do is having here a bite block with impressions. So this stays stable where it is, while on this side we have bite blocks which are plain or with an inclined plane. So while here we keep the interdigitation of the teeth, we will here stop the interdigitation to shift this one easier over to that side. So that's a very simple solution as well to correct 1/6 in crossbite on one side. To show you again, if we want to do it by torque and with the TPA, then we have one molar here, one molar there. And when we look at the TPA will look somehow like this when we look from this angle. This is where the shoe basically goes into the palatal slot. And what we do now is we will increase the torque here. So we will have some torque in that area. And at the same time expand both. Due to this torque here, we will have some opposing rotation of the whole jaw, which will lead to a rowing boat effect, moving it all over to that side. So this one will remain more or less stable because we have the torque, so it would actually move like this. But we have at the same time expansion, so it will move like this and back. While this one is not rotating anywhere, this one's not touched here, it will just go that way. And again, obviously, you can add here some extra bite blocks the same way like here as well. For example, here, you do that one with impression, and here you do that one completely plain. Impression, plain, like here, to do the same thing. This is biomechanics, this is kind of biomechanics, super simple, and you always can add, obviously, your bite blocks. So this is how you can do it with a TPA, and as well with a quad helix. And again, we add class 1 here. The next step just could be simple multiband. Sometimes we just have a single crossbite of one tooth and we just need a little bit of alignment to correct it. But we can also add certain things here. What can we add to the multiband? First of all, real expansion can only take place when we have wires which are stiff enough. When you remember the cookbook and the wire parameters, we were talking about that the overlaid stainless steel wire is the first one that can significantly change the shape of the arch form. So what we will need here is that we have an 18 stainless steel or a 1725 stainless steel or bigger. Could be 1622 stainless steel. 1616 is quite small, but it's just okay. So that's probably the smallest possible, the 1616 stainless steel. So from that size upwards, every wire here can really expand, just with a normal appliance. Number 6 would be multiband plus expansion wire or plus number 4. And at the same time, in both times, always, again, plus number 1, and here, plus number 1 bite blocks. So, I show you quickly what's the difference between number 5 and number 6, before we go on with the next, here on that side. Number 4 and number 6, we have the normal multiband, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 5, 6. So we have one single crossbite here. That's the upper jaw. So it's simply just placing your appliance and fitting your wire in there nicely first of all. And it may be easy to correct the 5 just by leveling and aligning. But quite frequently we have again the problem that we need to bring the 5 over the bite of the mandible. So out of a stable, not wanted crossbite occlusion. So what we're going to do here again, it's so simple, and I repeat it time and time again, but this is what we do. We need bite blocks again. And in this particular case, we want the molars both stay exactly where they are. So we do bite blocks with impressions on the molars, so they will stay. We just get some vertical space here to move that 5 over. So what does it mean when we're looking at it from the side? To show that to you quickly again, that just means that we have It's a class 2 code. Let's do a nice class 1 out of it. Okay, like that. We have the byte block here with impression. So we have some vertical space here in an area. And we can move that one over the byte from far back belatedly over into the correct spot with our fixed lines. And the lower 5 is not blocking the upper 5 and holding it inwards and back. So this is normal mechanics in a single tooth crossbar. Now 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, our appliance. Now we have already leveled in a line, and it has become already wider, but we still need a little bit more width. So what we do is, instead of using our normal size ornate stainless steel wire, we bend it as an expansion wire. Very simply like that. And that's super simple. You can try it at home. You just put it with index finger and thumb on either side at the end of the wire, pull it apart as hard as you can, and then we have a new arch shape like this. Now we fit it in here, and what will happen is that we have a little bit of expansion here, depending on the strength of the wire. So you can do that with every steel wire. The next step, what you can do is having a double wire system. That's a single wire system, just normal straight wire. And now we have a double wire system. That could be that, for example, as easiest way, we use a TPA chord helix, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our multiband here again. And we have our normal nitride aligning wire. And then we could add, obviously, the TPA here for expansion. So that's one way to do it. If we have a full side and cross byte, we add something again. What will it be? Same as here, probably again a cross byte, depending on what we want to achieve. Is it unilateral? We do on the healthy side with impressions, on a not healthy side, a plane or inclined plane. If we have to expand both sides, both plane, for example. So this is very, very easy. The next way, if we cannot fit in a chord helix or a TPA right here, we can apply the same thing, what we just did here, additionally here as well. So if this one is a complete full arch wire, which will be bigger or the same size as 18 stainless steel, we can add a double wire here, same like here, put it in the additional slot in a 6. So squeeze it in right here, put it in the slot here. You should actually always have 2 slots at the back to be able for every double wire technique I explained to you before. And in the front, we just tie it with a steel ligature to the main wire so it doesn't get dislodged. And this can be also a wire, at least 18 stainless steel, ideally here in this scenario to have more or less the same effect that we can expect from a TPA. It should be at least a 1622. Stainless steel, ideally even 1725 wire. Just remember one thing, which is quite funny about the M-power brackets from AO. When you have double slots at the molars, which I always recommend, as I just said before, they have in a 22 slot, 2 slot sizes actually. Don't ask me why, I found out myself years ago. I don't think that's fantastic, but this is very specific to them. The main slot is it's a 22 slot, so you can have as a main wire 1925 or even 2125 wire, but the additional slot on the molars is only 18 slot, 1822. So make sure that the biggest wire in the additional slot is 1725, unfortunately. Even though it would make sense to have a 1925 as an additional wire as well, we have this limitation here that it's in AO brackets. We can't fit any bigger than the 1725 stainless steel wire in there. Just to make sure you're not like super frustrated when you try to squeeze in a 1925 in an extra slot. It's just a different slot size. No man wire, no wire. So this is basically the way how you deal with expansion wires. You can use an expansion wire as the main full wire, starting at the 18 stainless steel wire, or starting straight away. You can use a double wire system, which is basically the same as if you use the TPA point helix, but instead of having that linearly or lately placed, it's sparkly placed, and you can do the same thing here as well. So this is the next what we have. And as I said, obviously combine it again with bite blocks to make sure that no movement is blocked by opposing teeth. So 1, 1, 1, you can see it's repeated every time again. This step number 1, super simple, and this is number 5, 6. And actually now we end already our complete dental alveolar correction. So everything that we see here right now on this first page actually is mainly dental alveolar. And as I said, we start with a simple, non-invasive, less complex and early stuff, and we go ahead to move forward to the more complex stuff. And now we enter page number 2, which is obviously then mainly skeletal. So what are the measures which are skeletal? Number 7 in our list then will be a rapid palatal expansion. And now it's going to be interesting. There are different types of rapid palatal expansion. There's the banded one, and there's the acrylic one. That means this one is rather like a splint, and that one's rather like a multiband. How does it look like? So we have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Usually what we have is then we have some bands on the 4 and the 6, the 4 and the 6, and they are connected here with stainless steel. Then we have a screw in the middle, the Hyrax screw, and that again is attached to this bar here. And then we can expand here in the maybe premolar area. Another option would be the splint type 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we have the splint type one that goes forward to the canine. We have the splint here. And then basically the same, the screw here, which is then attached to the acrylic parts here. Which one is better? That depends on you. I don't really mind which one's better. They have advantages and disadvantages, both of them. The only thing what I like to consider is, first of all, it happens quite frequently that this one gets loose easily here at the premolars, or that the contact here is not really good enough, so we have single tooth movement, which is different here. On the other hand, this one tends to get loose as well, so you need to bond that as well, really, really well, and you ideally, again, use some glass unimass cement, which has the advantage that the breakages are quite rare. On the other hand, removing all that stuff and the GIC is super messy work, to be really honest. It's not easy to remove everything of it. So the cleaning appointment is a nightmare for your assistant and for the patient as well. Basically for both of them, even a little bit more here. Nevertheless, I personally, but this is just my personal opinion, this is nothing scientific, I prefer this one. And I can tell you why I do that. As you can see here, when we do the expansion here, we quite frequently have again the problem that we need bite blocks. And we need them only here because on that side, the bite blocks actually are, due to the form of a splint, are already included. So you can plan that from the start that you have here some vertical occlusion or disclusion to make sure there's no problem in correcting the crossbite. So, and now we come to the more interesting parts when we're talking about the expansion. First of all, what we need to know here is, I'll write it down quickly as well, that's the activation. The activation should actually be twice per day, one turn, is about 0.25 millimeter. That means we have 0.5 millimeter of activation. And now some say, oh my God, the teeth can't be activated so fast, they can't move so fast. Correct. And that's exactly the reason why we do it. Because we don't want the teeth to move, we just want to move the maxillary face apart in the suture. And the next one we need to know is, how much expansion do we actually need? Because the Pyrex screw comes in various sizes. So they're available in 7 millimeters, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, depending on the manufacturer. There are loads of different sizes. The maximum is in the region of 12 millimeters. So what if you need more than 12 millimeters of activation? Then you probably need to place a second RPE after you work with the first one. So the Hyrex has an activation of a maximum of 12 millimeter. That means if you need more, place a second RPE. Okay, this is something we really should remember. How do you measure the activation? First of all, you obviously activation, you should measure it. And the easiest way to do that is actually, again, and this is the reason why I like to use the splint type, because I just draw it on here really small. You need to really watch carefully now. So when this is the splint that you have here, and here's the screw and the other stuff. Ideally at the area of the 6, make a color mark or just trim a line in this area in your acrylic. Then you can measure from one dot to the other. That's much easier than checking here at the screw especially because sometimes you have some deviation in the appliance itself. So the real activation you can actually only see here where the molars are and where you want it. So make a dot on the acrylic or trim a line with a burr in there so you can measure easily. So this is one of the tips of the day, so you can try it at home immediately. So next thing that's important is, what about suture opening? We will talk about MAPE and ZAPE in a minute, so talking about surgically assisted rapid palatal expansion. I will move now really quickly, but this is important. So some say, okay, you can take a DVT or a CT to check if the suture is open. I can tell you that's quite difficult, because really if there's a micro connection, the suture won't open up. And this is really tricky. And the easiest bit really to find it out, and literature says, it's not only in 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds that the suture can be open. It can be open even in adults up to 30 years, which is incredible for us sometimes to understand. But I've treated myself quite a few cases already in adults opening the suture nicely, even though there was no growth anymore. So how do we find out if this is a surgical case or not? So completely super simple. You explain to the patient, first of all, okay, we don't know if your suture will open or if it won't open. But never mind, you get your RPE inserted and you turn the screw twice a day. We see each other back in 7 days. So in 7 days, if everything goes right, we would have an activation of 3.5 millimeters. So quite a lot, obviously, a significant opening of the suture. And now comes the nice part about it. So when the patient comes back after 7 days to the regular appointment, we know the suture has opened, no matter how age. If the patient calls you on day 3 latest, or even day 2, and says, oh, it's so painful, I can't go ahead, I don't know what to do, then you know exactly, all right, the suture is not opening. Take it out again, do surgical assisted RPE. So this is somewhat a super easy way to deal with it. Just fit it in, book your appointment in 7 days. Same procedure as if it was a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, no matter, 30-year-old, always the same. Tell everyone twice a day. When they come back after 7 days, sutures open. When they come back after 2 days or 3 days with pain, sutures not opening, you need surgery. And again, even though you have, as I said, you have sometimes an adult patient age 30, you can open a suture. It could also possibly happen that you have an 18-year-old and the suture is not opening. So don't rely on it too much. Explain it to the patient beforehand. You don't know if it's going to open, yes or no, but we will know after a week. So no long trial and error, just a short period, and then you know exactly what to do. So this is the activation, 2 days, Pyrex 12 millimeter, and maybe you need twice to fit it in, measure your activation, and do this system with the 7 days to find out if the suture is opening or not. Another quick point is, which leads to the next scenario, the next appliance is, the orthodontists were quite annoyed that the teeth were tipping quite a lot when they did rapid palatal expansion. And then they said, okay, we need something that's not purely tooth-borne. And they invented the next one, which was the hybrid RPE, which is something like this: 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have a mini implant, you have a screw, and you have your molar bands. So, screws attached to the mini implants, screws attached to the molars. And then we have hybrid, because half mini implant, half tooth-borne anchorage of the expansion. And what did they find out? Okay, it's still some buccal tipping of the molars, so no one really does that anymore. So then they said, okay, we need to take that one off as well. Take another mini implant here, which is the next one, which is number 9, MAPA. I write it down properly in a minute. And interestingly, they found out, again, we have some tipping. It's less, but it's still tipping. But even if we don't touch the teeth, they're tipping. And then they got back to anatomy. And what they looked at then was that obviously the whole midface up to the nasion is split like that. So when the parts move apart like this, obviously the bony structures themselves are tipping. So the teeth actually are not, in terms of tooth movement, tipping, but they are tipping with their skeletal base, which is actually tipping. So that was the reason for a main part of the tipping as well. So if we have tipping there, don't worry too much about it. So this is a purely implant-born IREX, and this is called MAPA. MAPA means actually mini implant assisted, oh sorry, there's one P. Mini implant assisted rapid palatal expansion. And what else do we need? Probably as well, of course, it will be helpful if we use some bite blocks here again. And the next part, which actually can be combined with this one, this one, this one, and this one, is the zapper. And that's the surgically assisted rapid palatal expansion, which is the most invasive one. And what do? Is we open the suture, and what's often overlooked by orthodontists, but hopefully not by the surgeons, is we have to weaken the infrazygomatic crest as well to be able to move these parts a little bit easier apart, to weaken the bone here when we distribute the forces with the expansion, the distraction actually over the complete face. So this is the last part that we have zapper, and zapper could be surgically assisted RPE in MAPA style, surgically assisted RPE in hybrid RPE style, or surgically assisted in a typical RPE style with acrylic splint or with a banded multi-band type way of a splint. So what am I actually using? I am using this one here. I am using this one and these ones in combination because I personally like them most. There's nothing wrong with the others, don't get me wrong. There's so many using MAPA, and it's so en vogue at the moment, having a MAPA self-printed metal appliance designed in onyx self or so, but in most cases it's not really necessary. And how do we decide if we do need one of those or one of the others again? This is going back to the very early diagnosis that we actually have, that we look at the Wilson curve and the Valar ridge to decide, is there actually a skeletal problem, yes or no? Is there no skeletal problem? We don't even need to go for the whole side here, the whole skeletal part. We can do that dentally. But if we know there's no chance doing that dentally, then we really have to go to one of those and need to go through our list what we're going to do and even consider if we need to do zapper, yes or no. So this basically altogether, this is our transverse toolbox, and you can start very early with baby teeth dentition, super non-invasive, with bite blocks, with trimming, expansion plate, quad helix, multiband, expansion wires, TPAs, quad helix, all in combination with bite blocks, and go further to acrylic banded or acrylic, hybrid, MAPA, or zapper. And that's it for now. So this is basically everything that you need to treat any type of crossbite what you ever will need. And you have now your complete menu. Just pick from the list what's appropriate to your diagnosis. So you can see again, diagnosis is key. Do we have a crossbite, localized, one side, bilaterally, and then next, is it skeletal or is it dental? And once you know that, life's easy because you limit your list, and then there's just a few things you need to pick out. For example, let's say one last example, you have a 30-year-old patient and you see it's a unilateral crossbite, so one full side. You check Wala and Wilson, you see immediately it's not dental, it's skeletal. So you know, adult, one side, skeletal. Then next you just need to find out, can you do that with RPE or with SAPE? What you do, you fit it in, wait 7 days. When the patient comes after 2 days, you go for SAPE. When the patient comes back after 7 days, you continue with your RPE. You expand, measure on the dots that you mark on your splint, and when you have achieved the full 12 millimeters of your screw and you're still not finished, then build a new RPE and go for a second round. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. It was fun seeing you, meeting you here again. And soon you'll have the recording as well.